Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Let me make sure I'm up. Let me check my sound. Let's see if sound is intact. And sound is intact. Yes, good. Hope everyone is doing okay this morning. It is 10:14 in the AM on a Tuesday. Few announcements. So first, I want to thank all of my subscribers, everyone who assists with the show. If you like, if you subscribe, if you share the content, for the matter, if you support through Patreon or Super Cash, thank you very much. You guys are immensely appreciated. I try to make this as, I don't say this in somewhat of a redundant way. I know there's sometimes I say it, sometimes I don't, because I don't want to do it as automatic, as a trope. But it is true, and you guys are appreciated. If I didn't have people watching the show, there would be no point in doing the show. Be a crazy person screaming in the forest. So, thank you very much. It's immensely appreciated. Second point, I have guests coming on. So, this Thursday, at, 1 p.m., Tim Canova will be on the show. Tim Canova, going against Deborah Wasserman Schultz in Florida, fighting a legal battle on election, let's say election integrity, will be here 1 p.m. Thursday. So that's the first. On Wednesday, Jordan Sheridan, not this Wednesday after next, Jordan Sheridan will be on the show. And so he will be here at 5 p.m. next Wednesday, not this Wednesday, next Wednesday. And on 4/24, Gerald Horne. Now, I had seen Gerald Horne on Real News Network without really ever knowing who Gerald Horne was. Like I said, I look at all sorts of lectures. I'm not fundamentally anything. Like, I don't have this thing of socialist, communist, whatever. I think those things are labels. Those things don't really matter. I think people run into trouble when they have fixed themselves to a pure ideology in this way. My ideology is humanistic concerns. How do I make sure people have access to the things that they need? And how do I make sure people have access to a sustainable world? That's where I am. I'm flexible on the rest, as long as it gets those aims. So I didn't know who he was. Like, it was kind of just seeing multiple things. One of my subscribers was like, "You don't know who Gerald Horne is?" He shamed me. My subscriber shamed me. So the first thing I did was write it down, and I went to look up Gerald Horne. And I said, I know this guy. I've seen this guy before. And I listened to one of his lectures on Civil War and the American Revolution, and the subtext of those things, and it's an awesome segue, because the beauty of it being an awesome segue is kind of going into this idea of what's the narrative versus what's the underlying substructure to make that narrative what it is, or make people believe what that narrative what it is. What's the underlying thing? I understand what people believe, but what's the underlying thing that's propagating this particular behavior, that particular behavior? In that case, that particular war. So Gerald Horne said he's going to be on the show. One of the amazing things in the email, I mentioned Gerald Horne. I said, hey, I want to talk about the Civil War, the American Revolution, and if we have time, I want to get into this thing of identity politics in the United States. And he says, yeah, he says, that's fine. He says, I don't like hitting on purely the identity politics from the Democratic standpoint, because I'm trying to make the point that this stuff was weaponized by racists in the South, that Democrats are just responding to it. It's like if you see somebody, like you've heard me say before, if I am over the top on something, there's a reason for it. It was something that pushed me to be a particular way. So it's like, forgive me if I'm over the top on something. Well, he's making the point that, look, the reason why you have African Americans that are supporting these guys, and the reason why they're using identity in this way, is because identity was used in the other way. What is taking place is somewhat of a response to what initiated in the South. I agree with him. Don't misunderstand me. I agree with him. My only issue is I have to deal with now, meaning I have to deal with the Democrats using identity in this way. I understand this response. I agree. Unfortunately, from somebody who's on the left, somebody who's dealing with this, these guys are weaponizing identity now. They're weaponizing it now. And they're using this as a way of kind of pulling in blacks and Hispanics and everybody else without actually doing anything for blacks and Hispanics, by purely using identity to obfuscate from other ends. Some of this has to do with how we look at the world. So this should be a fascinating conversation, and I am even more more excited to get him on the show. He's a professor, so he's going to learn me. Now, for today, now that all the grunt work is out the way, do you remember this? I like to give historical context. You know me. So, yes, there's a little water to toe before we get to that point. I hope they don't strike this video. Meaning, I'm going to show this. I'm going to say fuck all, and I'm going to show this. If, for whatever reason, they copyright violate this video is already going to be demonetized, so I already know. So, I don't really care if they call it on the copyright content thing. But for whatever reason, they forced me to take this segment of the video out. Look at the other segments of the video to get the context of what I was saying in this part. I'm using this because I want to show how the media perpetuates a particular narrative without being critical of the narrative that they perpetuate. Take a look at this. This is the United States media doing its thing.
And dangerous mind of Muammar Gaddafi. Today, President Obama told Americans that the unpredictable and dangerous mind of Muammar Gaddafi. Today, President Obama told Americans that U.S. forces may be called into military action once again, this time against Gaddafi, joining other countries trying to keep the dictator from savaging his own people. Tonight, we set out to answer three big questions. Will other countries like England, France, Arab nations really take the lead in Libya? Can the American military stretch so thin in Afghanistan and Iraq add another burden? And is there a chance that Gaddafi will fold, even though he's threatening retaliation?
I'm going to let this play. Do you remember, there's this, I don't know if it was a book or passage or something, but there's this famous quote called the white man's burden. It's where, and England has even said this, all of these countries, all of these, it's fascinating that this continuously comes up over and over and over again. England, Rome, and now the United States, a burden of maintaining the world order. Nobody told England to go into India. England went into India because England needed to expand its markets. It couldn't keep up its living style based on how it was just based on in England. They needed to find new markets. Oh, we have India. Look at this large place. We have military. Let's use our military in order to leverage our markets. Now, the narrative here is we're taking civilization to these darkies. The United States said the same thing about Puerto Rico and Cuba. We're taking civilization to these darkies. This is our burden. This is our burden. Burden my ass. Nobody told you to do it. You did it on your own.
Our team has been reporting on this all day, is standing by, and we'll start with Jake Tapper and exactly what the White House is expecting now. Jake.
Good evening, Diane. Well, President Obama is mindful that the American public is weary of war and that the international community is skeptical of the U.S. attacking yet another Muslim country. So he has done everything he can to make this conflict seem as international as possible. He even mentioned our Arab partners in this effort 7 times today. President Obama today gave Muammar Gaddafi one last chance.
Muammar Gaddafi has a choice. A ceasefire must be implemented immediately. That means all attacks against civilians must stop.
Gaddafi must pull back his troops, the president said, and allow water, power, and humanitarian relief to reach civilians.
Let me be clear. These terms are not negotiable. These terms are not subject to negotiation.
The president had
uncritical stenographers telling what the president did, and the only questions, when they said we have 3 questions, I got excited. What are those 3 questions? Tell me the questions. Are you going to be newsmen? Is that thing in you that's humanity that wants to be actual newsmen because you took on the job of doing the news because you wanted to be skeptical and cynical of power? Are those going to come out in the 3 questions? And they did not. I'm asking, wait a minute, terrorism, attacking civilians, haven't we been doing that? Haven't we been going into countries that are killing and murdering civilians? Hasn't that been what we've been doing? What legal grounds do we have to do this? Even if you think this is right, even if everything that the president is saying is right, what legal grounds does the United States have to do this? None of that gets asked. None of that. And no, I didn't intend to step into this, but this annoys me. There's nothing more that annoys me than hypocrisy dealing with murdering civilians. And to have this president standing up there talking about somebody else. Hey, he needs to stop murdering civilians. Hey, How about stop sending terrorists in those countries? And how about when you send terrorists in those countries and you act as if that there's some kind of natural uprising? How about the media say, well, we've been doing stuff in those countries to kind of agitate those countries. And even though we're saying that we're uppity about these civilians being killed, we had no issue with killing civilians when we were doing our actions. Even if what you're saying is right, even if your cause is just, what legal grounds do you have to go into another country and bomb other countries in that way? The media seems mum on this point. And in explaining this story, they seem to be in the back for the government and posing questions to other nations. Hey, aren't you going to step up like the United States has been stepping up to stomp out terrorism? That's the only perspective that's provided. Now, you work all day, you turn on the evening news, and this is what you see. There's a dictator fucking around. And once again, it is our job as the United States to be sheriff and kick some ass in the Middle East where these other countries stand up. That's the only conversation. It's not that the country loves war. I understand my lefties get annoyed at the country. It's not that the country loves war. They're inundated with stuff like this. Let's let them keep going for a little bit. Maybe I'm wrong.
Had been committed to squeezing Gaddafi diplomatically, but everything changed on Tuesday. As Gaddafi's forces pushed to rebel stronghold Benghazi, the president told his national security team, "What we're doing isn't stopping him." Tuesday night, the president met with Defense Secretary Gates and other military officials over dinner, and he later instructed his national security team.
What do you mean isn't stopping him? What do you mean? What is your goal? What is your goal? Are you saying that your goal is regime change? All right, so let's keep going. Let's hear from Obama himself. Let's hear him talk about it.
I also want to be clear about what we will not be doing. The United States is not going to deploy ground troops into Libya. And we are not going to use force to go beyond a well-defined goal, specifically the protection of civilians in Libya. In the coming weeks, we will continue to help the Libyan people with humanitarian and economic assistance so that they can fulfill their aspirations peacefully.
If anything that Obama is going to say after this point contradicts that point, then ultimately Obama didn't say anything. So I'm stopping in here. I don't think I'm cutting off anything he's saying. He's saying, we're not going to go beyond this point. We're not going to send down ground troops. We're going to help the Libyan people determine what they want for themselves. Mind you, they're breaking international law. They're breaking our own constitutional law. He has no constitutional authority to do this at all. He's just fucking around and doing it. And in doing so, it is somewhat comical that we care about civilians in this case. It seems that we only care about civilians when somebody else is doing something. Let's keep going. You've heard him say, we're not going to send in ground troops. Well, this sounds like a lie. U.S. Special Forces take the fight to ISIS in Libya. This is 2016, so Obama is in office. Now, this is one of those Obama lies. In fact, let's call it that, an Obama lie. What do words mean? Well, words have a particular meaning when I use them versus words have a particular meaning that you think I mean. So if I say, look, we're trying to protect civilians. When we drop our bombs, only X number of civilians got killed. Well, you assume that civilians means somebody who's not necessarily involved in the process, somebody who's innocent of this process, and somebody who's not an enemy combatant. Well, Obama's definition of civilians is if the person is 16 years or older and a male, he's fair game. Wait a minute, those are different. But that's kind of the point. The point is the distinction and the difference. We want you to believe a certain thing. We know that you call civilians enemy combatants. We know that you call those things that. We call it something different. That's your assumption, man. We didn't tell you to make that assumption that civilians were non-enemy combatants. We changed the definition of the word for our purposes. What does ground forces mean in this case? Does ground forces mean just a large contingency of troops? Well, that's what Obama apparently means by it. But small cadre of forces that goes in and shoots people in the face. We don't consider that ground troops. The American public considers that ground troops. The overwhelming majority of anybody else who thinks about this and says, are you putting troops? Are they on the ground? And we're considering them ground troops. Apparently not for Obama. This is Obama lie. Let's read it. In a tiny remote aircraft hangar carved in the Sicilian rock decades ago, but now home to a new and vital front of the United States against ISIS. The United States Special Forces surveillance, fights are operating on the ground over Libya as the West moves to boost security operations in the country to bolster Libyans' increasingly desperate fight against ISIS. Have you noticed? A lot of this is justified based on the war on terror. All of this is justified based on the war on terror. Let me check something. Oh, my times are wrong. Okay, I can't use this. Scratch this. This is far, 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 far too late. But nevertheless, we did have forces in Syria. It went beyond just air forces. It also went into this thing of paying groups in order to go in to kind of rebel rouse and everything else. That's a bad example of it, but it's there. I'll find a link and put the link at the bottom for that particular point. But my point is, we did have ground forces in Libya. We did pay forces to go in there and disrupt and cause havoc and then turn around and point out and say, hey, 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 don't do anything bad to those people. And if you attack those people, we need to protect the hostages. We need to protect the civilians. Let's keep going. Let's fast forward to this. The goal of it supposedly wasn't regime change. The goal of it wasn't to go beyond the bounds of protecting civilians. Well, Hillary Clinton seemed to have a different thought.
That is the land of unconfirmed videos.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, oh, I'm sure it did. They're going to be captured or killed.
Democratic.
That sounds like a different motive. It sounds like a different motive to me. Now, we know that the WikiLeaks cables got across that the reason why they went into the reason they went into Libya had more to do with preventing this kind of Pan-African currency and gold. The thought was that Gaddafi was going to create his own gold market in Africa. He was trying to organize the continent. Now, whatever you want to think of Gaddafi, good, bad, somewhere in between, I don't care. It's not important to the conversation. What's important to the conversation is, does the United States president have the authority to go into any country that he wants? And what has been the consequences of the president behaving like a king, going into these countries extra constitutionally, however they may try to defend this? For all intents and purposes, is the president a king? Congress may have abdicated his authority over declarations of war, but it doesn't necessarily negate this idea that the Constitution does exist. The Constitution is a document, and I would imagine they would have a hard time justifying his willingness to just go into one country after the next, 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 after the next. There has been no congressional saying go for it, and Congress has the Declaration of War powers for a reason. Hillary Clinton, we came, we saw, we died. Obama saying our goal in this is just to protect civilians. Well, Hillary Clinton seems to have a different interpretation. She's talking about Gaddafi being sodomized with a knife, with a machete. Well, this is Obama now. Obama says Libya was the worst mistake of his presidency. Why did Obama say that? Why is Libya the worst mistake of his presidency? Well, this is RT. RT agrees with him. Just snapshot it. Where is it? Where is it? Right here. Right here. Libyan slave trade has shocked the world. Here's what you should know. If I'm not mistaken, Obama saying this was the worst mistake of his presidency happened before we found out that they were selling Africans in Libya. They weren't selling Africans in Libya before, Burry. They weren't doing that before. They're doing it now. Why are they doing it now? They're doing it now because Obama, the UK, France, the Wonder Twins have come up with this idea that they can create a world order unto themselves. And in creating this world order unto themselves, they decided to go and destroy a country. They wanted to get Gaddafi out of his seat. Fuck all to authority, meaning whether you want to talk about the Constitution or whether you want to talk about Parliament or anything else. Fuck all to authority. And I understand France and the UK have a different political system. But I'm making the point that the leaders of these countries have made the decision on their own to use the military force of their country to beat the shit out of another weaker country. The strong do as they must. The weak do as they may. The rest of the world, we're going to make a decision unto our own to do this. And they did. Now, whatever the reasoning for this, they did. And the consequences of that decision was to destroy that country. Obama's saying he's looking for the well-being of the Libyans. They're selling fucking slaves. That's what they're doing right now, based on your decisions, Barry. Yeah, it was the worst mistake of your life. And he said that was the worst mistake of his life before they were selling slaves. They weren't doing that before. They're doing that now. All of that based on your actions and based on your decisions and getting into that country. And the irony of this is that people are flipping out because Bernie Sanders said something about Obama on Martin Luther King's Day as if they're somehow related to one another. One person was making a decision to try to push against imperialism, push against this idea of racism in the United States, the boot of the United States on the back and the necks of darkies all around the world. This president was involved in a process that allowed slaves, Africans, to be sold in another country. Now, explain to me again why criticizing Obama is somehow hurting Martin Luther King's legacy. Explain to me. Worst mistake of his life. That's before we knew they were selling slaves. Obama, in this case, absolutely agrees with RT. So let's hear these two talk about it. Now, they may take a different slant, but Obama at the very least acknowledges that was a fuck up. That was a fuck up, to put it lightly.
In Libya, French fighter jets were deployed over the African country on March 19, 2011. The operation triggered a series of events that changed the face of Libya.
Muammar Gaddafi has lost legitimacy to lead its league.
No fly zone.
We came, we saw, he died.
And guess what? They got a chance now.
When Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi threatened to crack down on protesters in Benghazi, the UN Security Council passed a resolution authorizing member states to take all necessary measures to protect civilians under threat of attack in the country, including Benghazi, while excluding a foreign occupation force of any form on any part of Libyan territory. 5 countries, including Russia, China, and Germany, abstained from voting on military action in Libya.
We are standing with the people of Libya.
And the people of Libya must be protected.
NATO allies stand behind the legitimate aspirations of the Libyan people for freedom, democracy, and human rights.
After thousands of bombs and missiles hit their targets, it became clear that for NATO allies, protecting civilians in Libya meant wiping out Gaddafi's military and targeting the Libyan leader himself.
You showed the world you would get rid of a dictator and you would choose freedom.
Very quickly, Libya began to plunge into chaos, with many factions fighting each other and thousands of civilians dying as a result. Islamists seized the capital, Tripoli. The country has failed to form a functional government. Libya went from being one of the richest nations in Africa to one of the most troubled.
The aftermath.
And that's the important part. For all their talk about we're only trying to protect civilians, for all that talk of we want to allow the Libyan people to have this level of self-determination, they plunged one of the richest countries in Africa into turmoil and poverty. Not to mention selling slaves. When we're talking about Syria and the conversation goes to Syria, the media and the political system itself have turned on this thing of, hey, let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's not let the horrors of our past stop us from creating horrors into the future. Let's do it again. A chemical attack goes off in Syria. I've done video after video after video making the point that this makes no sense. That the logic of this makes no sense. And I'm not going to fully go over those videos because at this point, you can look over my old catalog to see my point on this. Of course, Obama wanted to attack Syria before. Yes, the terrorists themselves have access to chemical weapons. And no, there has been no investigation, meaning there can be no evidence of this because there's been no investigation. And the fact that the terrorists are the only people who would get anything to gain from this makes the narrative that the media is pushing illogical, which makes me think it's dubious. The United States wants to change the regime in Syria, and just so happens, here's a chemical strike. Just so happens. Where's the evidence? When Mathis comes out and says, we have no evidence that Syria did the last chemical strike, but that in no way stopped the United States from striking at Syria. What about now? And with the consequences that Russia has said, if you try to regime change like you did in Libya, we will intercede. With the consequences being that dire, shouldn't you at the very least ask some questions about the positions that you're beginning to take and the consequences that those things may lead to for the rest of the world? I apparently have an ally on the right for this. Tucker Carlson. Shocks the shit for me to say. Tucker Carlson. Let's look at a segment. This video is going way longer than I thought it was going to go. Let's look at Tucker Carlson's segment, and let's hear what Tucker Carlson thinks about this. A guy sent me this. He says, I think he was somewhat shocked in the same way that I was shocked. Like, oh my God, a socialist is sending me Tucker Carlson. A socialist is sending me something for Tucker Carlson. Let's hear Tucker Carlson talk about this, and he's absolutely right. I told you I listened to some of everything. I have to be honest, it shocks the shit out of me to play this video. But I will watch this with my audience, but I've read the side of it, so I know some of the stuff that he's about to say here. Tucker Carlson eviscerating this idea of whether we should go into Syria. And mind you, it's not that I think that Tucker Carlson believes that. I think in his mind it was such a fuck up in Libya. Why on earth do we think that this is going to be better in Syria? And he's right. Even if you can say that they did it, should we do anything about it? Those things are separate. Saying that something took place that was bad in the world is so much separate than whether or not we should be the sheriff of the world and whether there are other methods of dealing with the issue. Not to mention, my position. They don't have evidence. They haven't done an investigation. The terrorists have access to the stuff. They are the only ones with something to gain. The United States wants to hit it. Most likely, just looking at the scenario, it was either a false flag that the United States assisted in, or the terrorists did it and the United States is using this as a pretext. Doesn't really matter to me. Both of those things end up with them trying to attack or remove that government. And I know the fuckfest that took place in Libya. So, yeah, I have qualms with this perspective that these guys are taking. And an odd alliance from left and right. Let's hear Tucker Carlson's perspective on this also.
Tonight, on a single point of agreement, America must go to war in Syria immediately. Bashar al-Assad cannot continue to lead that country. He must be overthrown. Assad is an evil man, they tell us. His latest crime is a chlorine gas attack carried out over the weekend by his forces against a rebel-held suburb of Damascus. Assad's poison gas suffocated children. Pictures of the aftermath of that are all over the internet, and they are horrifying. Assad is a monster. That's the official story. Almost everyone in power claims to believe it. The push to war in Syria, by the way, has united politicians from both sides. Lindsey Graham and Howard Dean typically agree on very little. Not much at all. But today, they are both calling for war in Syria. Graham is demanding massive attacks on the Syrian military. Dean is going even further than that. On Twitter, he called the president, quote, a wimp for merely sending thousands of troops and launching tons of bombs at Syria. That's not enough for Howard Dean, who, as you may remember, once ran for president as the peace candidate. Tonight, he wants total war in Syria. Television pundits, of course, strongly agree. This morning, the foreign policy team over on MSNBC explained that it's far more important for American troops to fight in Syria than it is to secure our own border here in America. Watch.
There's no question that now, all these years later, it is Donald Trump's challenge. He has to take action. He's spoken to Macron. What he ought to do is a coordinated action. There has to be a comprehensive response.
As Trump leaves to fight his imaginary border war, he's leaving the real war where we could make a difference, and said he's turning it over to Assad and to Iran and to ISIS. This is something that Barack Obama wouldn't even do if confronted with these set of facts.
Trump has to take action in Syria. Everyone nods sagely. That ought to make you nervous. Universal bipartisan agreement on anything is usually the first sign that something deeply unwise is about to happen, if only because there is nobody left to ask skeptical questions. And we should be skeptical of this, starting with the poison gas attack itself. All the geniuses tell us that Assad killed those children. But do they really know that? Of course they don't really know that. They're making it up.
Yes! Yes! Thank you! Thank you! Somebody in the media looks at this and says, how do they know? The most honest question on the fucking planet. How do they know? They're talking about a fucking war. They're making this shit up. They're making it up. It's like I scan this stuff because I'm like, this is bogus. They're making this shit up. They don't have anything for this. And I look around and one person after the next nod their head over and over and over and over and over again saying, hey, we got to go to war. 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 Unison. And I'm sitting here like, they're making this shit up. How do they know? Like, I was around during the Iraq War, yeah, but it was in and out, not necessarily fully paying attention to it. A little bit more paying attention to it when they invaded Libya, but not fully into it. And for this, is like, they don't know this. They don't know. They have no evidence. They have nothing. They're just biting off the hip. We don't like Donald Trump. Donald Trump said he was going to take his troops out of Syria. We don't like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is being weak on this. We don't like him. Left or right. Let's stop calling them left, right. Democrats or Republicans. They nod their heads. All of them say the same thing. Now, mind you, all of them have been against Donald Trump and everything that Donald Trump has done. I have too. Not against everything. There have been some things he's done that I've liked. But for all intents and purposes, they have been against him. The media has been fully against him. And now in this case, the media all agree what they must do. It is bizarre for me to hear Tucker Carlson say the most true thing in the world that nobody else is saying. They're making it up. Making it up. Sorry. Go ahead, finish Tucker. I'm sitting here, I was like, ugh. I was like, yes, yes, yes.
They have no real idea what happened. Actually, both sides in the Syrian civil war possess chemical weapons. How would it benefit Assad using chlorine gas last weekend? Well, it wouldn't. Assad's forces have been winning the war in Syria. The administration just announced its plans to pull American troops out of Syria, having vanquished ISIS. That's good news for Assad, and about the only thing he could do to reverse it and to hurt himself would be to use poison gas against children. Well, he did it anyway, they tell us. He's that evil. Please, keep in mind this is the same story they told us last April. Do you remember that? It was almost exactly a year ago. The new administration announced it was no longer seeking to depose Assad from power. Regime change was no longer our policy. So the usual war chorus in Washington started yelping, went berserk, and days later, Assad supposedly used sarin gas against civilians in Syria. There was video. We bombed a Syrian airbase in response to that. At the time, this show asked what seemed like the obvious question, are we really sure that Assad did that? It seems weirdly timed and counterproductive to him. Shut up, they explained. Of course we're sure. What an unpatriotic question. But of course they were lying. 2 months ago, the Secretary of Defense admitted that actually we still have no proof that Assad used sarin gas last year. The story, it turns out, was propaganda. It was designed to manipulate Americans, just like so much of what they say.
Yes! Yes! Oh my God, yes! Fucking yes. Oh, let him finish. I don't even have a comment on that. That is breathtakingly honest. In a way that I did not think was possible on network news. That is breathtakingly honest. I can't believe this is coming out of the mouth of Tucker Carlson. Let's let him finish. This is mind-blowing. Yeah. Nearly fell out my chair. Come on.
We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. But just for the sake of argument, let's assume they're not lying this time. Let's assume Assad did just use chlorine gas against kids. He's perfectly capable of that, by the way, not defending his moral character. Let's say he did do it. Would that be worth starting a new war over? Overthrowing Assad's regime in Syria would result in chaos. Many thousands would die. And in fact, we might likely see the genocide of one of the last remaining Christian communities in the Middle East, and we ought to care about that. Some of the dead, of course, would be American servicemen. A new war would cost us tens of billions of dollars, maybe hundreds of billions. Would it make America safer? Would it make the region more stable? Let's see. How exactly did regime change work in Iraq and Libya? Doesn't matter, say our moral leaders on CNN and everywhere else. Atrocities like this cannot be tolerated. Okay, but let's be real. We do tolerate atrocities like this all the time. For example, there's a devastating famine killing children in Yemen right now. The Saudis are causing that famine. Should we drop tomahawks on Riyadh in response?
Oh my God. Is he saying this on television? Wow! Yes, yes, yes. He's right. Yes, I'm shocked as shit by this because I ask these questions all the time, and I never see this in the media. I never see it in the media. I ask these questions all the time, and just from a logic standpoint, it's the most obvious questions they ask. They killed 100 people by this, even if by your own standards what you're saying is right. Even if you're right, should we also go to our allies who's doing the same thing in Yemen? Wow. He's blowing me away by this. I'm mind blown. Not so much that it's not true. Yeah, everything he's saying is absolutely true. It's somewhat of a flat fact. And even someone as a logic argument, everything that he's saying is true. You're going to have lefties, Democrats who look at this, but what he's telling you is correct. From a logic standpoint, strip out the labels for the moment. Pretend this is not Tucker Carlson. Pretend this is a guy in a bar somewhere that you just happen to end up having a conversation with, and he's engaging you on this. Everything that he's telling you is absolutely factually correct. I don't care how he gets to this position. What he's saying is correct. Let's let him keep going. I'm trying to stop my outbursts.
Not until it's on YouTube, apparently. When you conduct foreign policy by viral video, pictures are essential. But in real life, Syria is a highly complicated place. With Assad gone, who would run it exactly? Do we have another strongman in place to install? Or is it our hope that a stable democracy will magically appear in the wake of this protracted civil war? And who exactly are these moderate rebels you're always hearing about, the ones that we're supporting with your tax dollars? Well, a lot of them turn out to be Islamist crazies. For example,
yes. Yes, 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 yes. What does it mean to be a civilian? What does it mean to be a civilian? Well, you think it means somebody who's not involved in the process, and you think it means somebody who has nothing to do with it. Well, Obama doesn't think that. The military is not thinking that. They have a different definition of what it means to be a civilian. They've changed the meaning in order to suit their needs. What does it mean to be a moderate rebel? What does it mean to be a moderate rebel? Now, you think of moderate as calm, rational. But how do you know that they mean that? How do you know that's not a political talking point that they use in order to sell the war, to make you think that who they're supporting is somehow different than the other terrorists who are trying to take down the government? They're changing the name to suit their needs. Fucking A. Wow.
The city where the chemical attack just occurred is mostly controlled by the Army of Islam. It's a radical group that has called for establishing an Islamic state under Sharia law in Syria. That group's founder called for exterminating all Shia Muslims and Alawites from the country. But we're supposed to wage a new war on this group's behalf. Why is that exactly? Back in 2013, when the Syrian civil war was still in its early days, one onlooker weighed in on Twitter. Here's part of what he wrote, quote, "We should stay the hell out of Syria. The rebels are just as bad as the current regime. What will we get for our lives and billions of dollars? Zero." In another tweet, he said this, quote, "Let the Arab League take care of Syria. Why are these rich Arab countries not paying us for the tremendous cost of such an attack?" And in yet another tweet, he said this, "What will we get for bombing Syria beside more debt and a possible long-term conflict?" Of course, you know who wrote that. It was Donald Trump, and he was right. And that's one of the reasons he got elected president. And now the same people who brought you a dying American middle class, undefended American borders, and endless pointless wars in countries you could not find on a map are telling the president he's got to depose Assad for reasons that are both unclear and demonstrably dishonest. And by the way, it may happen. But before it does, Congress ought to consider a brand new constitutional amendment. Let's call it the Lindsey Graham Amendment. And here's what it would say. Congress shall topple no government until it finishes rebuilding the last government it toppled. And furthermore, talk show generals shall be required to personally visit the battlefield of every war they advocate for. End of amendment.
Yes. 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 Tucker Carlson, the patriot. Yes. Everything that he just said was true. Everything that he's just said was fucking true. And it's absolutely right. Everything he said was true. Including Donald Trump tweeting out, why are we there? Why are we doing this? What is the point of this? Is Donald Trump going to be Donald Trump? Or is Donald Trump going to be cowed by these armchair generals, these talking faces, comfortable with their $30,000 a day salary, talking about undermining another government and killing a bunch of other people for unclear ends? Unclear ends. And by the way, I showed this poll yesterday. The people who put Trump in that office, when asked about whether or not they want a war, 67%. This is Chernovich. Chernovich, alt-right, you call him racist and all this stuff. Fair enough. I care less about that for right now. I'm talking about the specifics of whether or not those people who supported Trump, his base, wants another war. That answer is no. Demonstratively, no. Tremendously, no. That answer is no. Is Donald Trump going to be Donald Trump, or is Donald Trump going to be cowed by these people who are around him pushing for military intervention and conflict? Are you going to be that weak, that low energy, and bend your knee and go and fight and destroy somebody else when you just came out saying you're taking out military troops? What about dealing with truth? What about asking those questions that Tucker Carlson asked as a defense for the things that these guys are saying? You are the president of the United States. You have a bully pulpit. They call it a bully pulpit for a reason, because just the virtue of you opening your mouth and saying things changes the level of debate and tilts the level of conversation. And at the very least, they're going to respond to something that you're saying. Do you understand the misery that took place in Libya? And take out the misery of it, the cost. The cost. You're against this interaction in Syria prior. Be against it now. Be the same person you were when you were running for office. What I would tell you is, if you do take operations in Syria in order to undermine the Syrian government, you will lose your presidency. You will lose. Look, when I came on the show, I've been fair to Donald Trump versus my own humanitarian values. I think that's been pretty clear. You can look at my record. I've been straightforward. Things that he's done that I like, I've said I've liked. Things that he's done that I've not, I said I didn't like. An issue when he said, I'm taking these troops out of Syria and I'm going to focus on America. Putting the U.S. military on the border is dumb. It's dumb as rocks. Saying you're taking the troops out of Syria, that's smart. That's what your public, that's what your base, that's what the people who were motivated and put you in that office over Hillary Clinton, against every media apparatus, against every media establishment. It was them. It's what they wanted. The American public does not want militaristic intervention. Now, be a reality show host. Be that guy. The guy who was able to crowd surf in order to win the presidency. That guy who said, I don't want this war with Syria. That guy who was against this intervention in Syria. What is this getting us? America first. How does America prosper for this? How does America prosper? The country itself, not the elites, not these people in these armchairs who are comfortable with these fat heads having this conversation about intervening in other countries. Not those guys. The people who put you in that office. The overwhelming majority of this country that does not want this intervention, and that they are working hard to sell this as a war. You have all of these people believing that you're fighting the globalists. Do so. You're the president of the United States. I understand you have all these generals telling you all these things to do. You're the president of the United States. You're the bellwether. You're the person. You make the choice. Make them prove it. I understand that everything I'm saying is somewhat pointless. You're going to get carried along in the tide. And you not want to go with the political implications of these things. One of the political implications will be a diminishment of your base. One of the political implications will be you will lose the next presidential election. Mark that shit in stone. If H.A. Goodman wants to argue with me over this, over presidential action, meaning if the president of the United States makes the determination to go into Libya, he'll lose. A-Shay can bring his ass on the show and defend Trump in this particular case if Trump takes that action. He will fucking lose. Guarantee you. The number of people who are supporting Trump going against this idea that he was against intervention into Syria, against this kind of push against Russia, those people would be diminished. They would find that those people to be liars. They would find your president to be a liar. I guarantee you that in the same way I am making this case that they need to prove before they make the determination of going into Libya, that those people are also thinking the same thing. You did not get elected to regime change. Be clear. You did not get elected to regime change. I don't want there to be any misunderstanding of what I'm saying. I didn't vote for you. I don't particularly like you. But among the people that did vote for you, I would guarantee you, you did not get elected for regime change. Those people will consider you to be a liar. You lied on issues of Obamacare. You lied on issues of talking about health care for everyone else. You lied on this idea that the rich weren't going to get massively more rich under your administration. And now on this, they would also have deemed you to be a liar. They would deem you to be a liar. Steven Citron, love your show. You've become one of my favorites. I wish you the best. Tucker Carlson won a Pulitzer for that truthful segment. You and I, I nearly fell out my chair when Tucker said some of that stuff. Because it's stuff that I've been saying over and over and over and over again, one segment after the next. And you hear people repeat this stuff on media, on these large airwaves. My mom is listening to that shit. My friends are listening to that shit. People who consider themselves Democrats. And that's what they're absorbing and that's what they're hearing. And you're like, oh, dude, you're being propagandized to. In the same way that if you were living in the Soviet Union, they were being propagandized to. It is sad and pathetic to see. And it is astonishing to see Tucker Carlson come out and say this stuff. It's amazing. Grinning libertarian. I laugh uncontrollably every time Jamal goes, yes! The only way we can defeat authoritarian shills is unlikely alliances. Love it, JT. Look, Caitlin Johnson is right. Some insane ideologues to their party went after her on this. Those people are insane. Caitlin Johnson is right. Tucker Carlson is saying something that's perfectly true. What he said in that segment is unimpeachably true. It is unimpeachably true. You people, some of you people want a war. That's what it boils down to. You believe that because you have this $1 trillion military that you can do whatever the hell you want around the world and there are no consequences for the things that you do. The West believes that it has created a world order unto itself, meaning the way in which it understands the world and the way in which it operates is the world itself. You will be mistaken. You will be fundamentally mistaken. Do you understand? Like right now, because of how the United States and the West is going about their affairs around the world, the disadvantage to many of the other countries that are around the world, particularly the smaller nations. The Hague is talking about prosecuting the guy from the Philippines, Duarte, for killing drug dealers. Now, yeah, Duarte is a despicable figure. And yes, he is a strong man to some degree. And yes, I don't particularly like that he's killing and murdering drug dealers. But is he the top of the list? And if he's not the top of the list and you're choosing Duarte, well, you're missing all of these other Western leaders that have done horrible, disgusting things. Where's your legitimacy for this stuff? And now you have this situation where they're talking about going into another country because that country is such a bad guy. He's a bad guy. There are a lot of bad guys. And many of those bad guys you're out there actually supporting. The Saudi guy was here grinning it up. He's a fucking murderer. They're killing people in their own country. They're a repressive regime of religious maniacs. But they're okay because they're our buddies. We're friends with that guy. So that bad guy is okay coming to the United States and grinning it up in the UK. You guys are fucking pathetic. And Tucker Carlson is absolutely right to call him out. Balthazar 228. They can't be Syrian about Russia. And they can't be Syrian about Russian to conclusions. Oh, I love that. I love that. I read it weird because I was like, wait a minute, what does he say? It sounds weird. They can't be Syrian about Russian to conclusions. that weren't Putin context when Tucker fucking Carlson, the guy who could barely tie a bow tie for Crossfire, is making more sense than Maddow. Yes. 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 Concur. Concur. Rushing to conclusions. Look, the only reason that they would rush to conclusions is if the investigation doesn't matter. The evidence doesn't matter. The conclusion is what matters. We need to move you directly to the conclusion, because once we are at the conclusion, we can say, let's take action. The problem with this is rushing to the conclusion itself. The conclusion itself, even if the conclusion is right, is not necessarily a leap to let's take action. They're wrong on both fronts. They're wrong on the conclusion itself, and they're wrong on what they should do about the conclusion. When did we get to this weird, peculiar place that this idea of war is automatic? Something bad happened in the world. Yes, something bad happened in the world. We need to go to war. Wait. Calm down. Is that what you really need to do? Israel has just murdered a bunch of people, and in addition to shooting in a bunch of unallowed crowd. Thousands. 40,000 or more. Crowd. 40,000 or more. Injuring, 773, if not more. And up to the last count that I've seen, murdering about 30. They were snipers. They looked in their scopes. They looked at the people who they were going to shoot. They shot people in the head and the knees and the groin. The guy for Israel said himself, we know exactly where each of those bullets went. Which, yes, I would imagine so, seeing as they were snipers. You've just admitted to a war crime, asshole. Now, that's a big deal. Israel has just committed a war crime in Gaza. What do? Do we immediately get our airplanes? Are the Western powers going to start dropping bombs in order to change the regime that's in the right-wing regime that's in Israel, that's murdering Palestinians and an open-air ghetto? Is that what we're going to do? Everybody grab their pitchforks, grab their weapons. We need to go to Israel to save the Palestinians and liberate the Palestinians. I don't remember hearing that. I don't remember anybody even saying that. And yet, that's what we have in Syria. Tucker Carlson, yeah, shocks the shit out of me to hear that. But everything Tucker Carlson said right there was right. Everything he said right there was absolutely right. So, it's amazing. Israel got tired of sniping journos in Gaza, so they decided to mix it up a bit and start bombing Syria. That's exactly what took place. That's exactly what took place, Spartan Guard. Yeah. So, I am blown away by this. Fucking A for Tucker Carlson. Good job. Good job. Whatever his other failings, good job. Somebody say he should win a Pulitzer Prize for that. He should win a Pulitzer Prize for that. That is a fucking amazing piece. That is an amazing piece. DC 420 LA, they bombed Syria all year. Here's the difference. Russia has come out saying, if you attack Damascus and our people are there, we will attack the units that attack Damascus. That's the difference. The ante has been upped. A nuclear power has now allied itself with Syria. It's not good or bad that they've allied themselves with Syria. It's only good or bad depending upon the context that you're in. If you're in the United States, we don't like that. If you're in Syria, oh, we love this. If you're a refugee that was under some kind of religious maniac's rule, oh, we love this. It's context. It depends on where you are. It's relative to where you are. David Thompson, Democrats and mainstream media forcing us to defend Tucker Carlson. Isn't that insane? Isn't that crazy? That this is where we are. Amazing sign that this is where we are. Yeah, I'm not going to keep it long. I'll end it at that. I was blown away by this. I mean, I'm not going to keep it long. This thing is going like an hour. So, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. I'm going to end it here. Guys, thank you all for showing up. I am going to go into multiple stories throughout the course of the day. So, I will probably see you guys in a shortly. Lita Gray. Tucker spoke the truth to power. No one else in mainstream media did. Thanks, Jamal. Yes, he did. That's shocking. Like, all of the media reports, for all intents and purposes, have always been against Donald Trump. They've lined up against him. And so now in this case, they've lined up against them, And Tucker Carlson coming out saying, wait a minute. All of these people are lining up in one direction. But is what they saying true? And I did a video yesterday asking the exact same questions of Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson could have watched my video and just said, hey, this guy is right. Here it is. That's not what took place. I'm just saying. He did an awesome job of it. That's all I'm getting at. He's asking the most logical questions on the planet to ask in the situation to which we find ourselves. So, good job, Tucker Carlson. Propaganda. When you blame it on Jews, that's anti-Semitic. I don't think I said anything about Jews. I said something about Israel. It's a difference. There's a difference in those things. It's a state. It's a country. Try to make it a Jewish state. Bullshit. It's a state. It's state. It will be held to its crimes like any other state will be held to their crimes. I don't give a shit about the religion of it. I didn't say anything about this kind of religious thing or Judaism. I said Israel. If Israel is murdering Palestinians, Israel is murdering Palestinians. That's a flat fact of the world. That's what's taking place. That's objective reality. Adding this stuff of anti-Semitism is bullshit. I give no daylight to that. I give zero daylight to that. If you're attacking somebody for being a Jew, that's one thing. I am attacking the state of Israel. And I'm attacking the state of Israel because it's committing war crimes. And those war crimes need to be accounted for. So, I'll leave it at that. Alright guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks everyone. And by the way, come on. Lita Graves, David Thompson, Beltazar, Renee Libertarian, and Steven Citron. Thank you guys very much. You're an amazing help to the show. So, thank you for your contribution. Alright guys. See you in like 20 minutes or so.